First at 9 this Friday, the 27th of September 2024. Arrival and departure. Sri Lanka reinstate previous e-visa issuing system. Forensic audit to probe irregularities. Security dissolve. Police security provided for former parliamentarians recalled following the dissolution of parliament. Exceed expectations. Sri Lanka's economic growth expected to outreach expectations, says central bank chief. New targets. IMF recommends Sri Lanka to adopt a single policy rate and target midpoint of a policy corridor.
ඔබේ විශ්වාසය දෙනු සෙන්සුරයින් දැන් ළඟමැති ෆාමසියෙන් ලබාගත හැක. කොහොමද? ඒනං ස්වදේශී ඔරිජිනල් කොහොඹම තමයි.
This is Derana First at 9, live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
And a very warm welcome. You're joining us tonight on First at 9, your prime time English news service. We take you to your top stories making headlines tonight. The new government has reinstated the previous visa issuing system with effect from midnight yesterday. Thereby, the responsibility of issuing visas on arrival and online to foreigners travelling to Sri Lanka is once again vested with the Department of Immigration and Emigration of Sri Lanka. This comes in a backdrop where the management of issuing visas on arrival was taken over by a third party earlier this year. The new Minister of Public Security, Vijitha Herath, has initiated a forensic audit to probe irregularities associated with VFS Global, the third-party agent which was entrusted with issuing on-arrival and online visas to foreigners on behalf of Sri Lanka Immigration and Emigration.
VFS Global had been handed over the management of visa issuing facility at the Bandaranaike International Airport from the 1st of May this year. However, it was reported that a large number of visitors to Sri Lanka encountered inconveniences when seeking entry clearance visa, both online and on arrival. Addressing the recent issues pertaining to the issuance of on-arrival and online visas, the new government announced that measures were taken to reinstate the previous visa issuing system. Thereby, the Department of Immigration and Emigration began processing on-arrival and online visas to foreigners with effect from midnight yesterday. The President's office announced that foreigners can now apply online for visas, which will then be processed within a period of 24 hours.
Online ක්‍රමයටතේ visa අයදුම් කිරීම දැන් විදේශිකයන්ට ඉතාම පහසුවෙන් කරගන්න පුළුවන්.
Foreigners can now easily obtain visas online. This was a pressing issue and we resolved it. We sought advice from the Attorney General and worked according to the court order. We have also taken measures to initiate a forensic audit to investigate irregularities associated with the VFS Global. Legal actions will be taken based on the findings.
ඒ ව්‍යවහාරික විගණනය හරහා මේ ගණදුනුවේ තියෙන අක්‍රමිකතාවය පිළිබඳව හොයා බලලා ඒ අනුව අපි වහාම නීතිමය ක්‍රියා මාර්ග ඉදිරියේදී අනිවාර්යෙන් ගන්න.
Meanwhile, the appeals court issued an interim injunction preventing the implementation of a decision taken by the previous government to purchase 750,000 e-passports from two private companies. Taking into consideration a writ petition filed by Epic Lanka, a private company, appeals court judge Mohammed Lafar Tahir issued an interim injunction to be in effect until the 1st of October. The petitioning company had pointed out that the previous government had decided to purchase the stock of passports without due procurement process. The former Minister of Public Security, Derana, and former Secretary to the Ministry are named as respondents of the petition.
Horizon Campus 2024 Intake 2. Register now. චන්දරුසුමේ කාගෙන් මනාපේ සිංහ TV සඳහා සුපිරි ඩීල්.
President Anura Kumara Dissanayaka has ordered the reopening of roads around the President's house in Colombo Fort, which were previously closed for public vehicular traffic. The President's house and its surrounding area had been classified a high security zone and were closed to the public. However, all roadblocks have now been lifted following President Dissanayaka's order. Therefore, Sir Barun Jayatilaka Mawatha and Janadipati Mawatha will be accessible to the public from the 28th of September. All police personnel assigned to provide security to former parliamentarians have been recalled. Following the dissolution of Parliament on the 24th of this month, Sri Lanka Police stated that the police protection and security detail provided to all ministers, deputy ministers, state ministers and other parliamentarians who represent Parliament, as well as former governors and former ministers who represent provincial councils, will be removed. However, the security provided for former Speaker, former Deputy Speaker and former opposition leader will not be removed. Also in headline news tonight, Central Bank Governor Dr. Nandalal Veerasinghe stated that the country's economic growth will exceed the annual projections made by both the Central Bank of Sri Lanka and the International Monetary Fund. He made these remarks during today's monetary policy briefing. When asked about the new president's proposed debt sustainability analysis, Dr. Veerasinghe noted that Sri Lanka is in the final stages of completing the debt restructuring program. He emphasized that the Ministry of Finance must make a final decision on whether to change or maintain the current targets under the IMF debt restructuring program.
The Monetary Policy Board at the meeting held yesterday decided to keep the policy interest rates at the current levels. Accordingly, standing deposit facility rate will be at 8.25 and standing lending facility rate will be at 9.25. Inflation softened significantly in the recent months with the recent downward revisions to energy prices. Going forward, headline inflation is projected to remain below the inflation target in the near term. The latest projection confirms that headline inflation is likely to be below the target by a notable margin in the upcoming months. However, core inflation is likely to remain around the current level on average. Supported by appropriate policy measures, we expect inflation to gradually align with the targeted range of 5% over the medium term after overshooting during the second half of 2025.
ඒක හරි එහෙම නැත්නම් ඒ තියෙන ටාගට් කියන ඒවා වෙනස් කරනවද නැද්ද සකච්ඡා කරනවද තීරණය මුදල් අමාත්‍යාංශයේ තීරණය.
The Ministry of Finance must decide whether to proceed with the current debt sustainability analysis and targets or to modify them. We are not involved in that decision. We have reached the end of the current program. The President also announced that the debt restructuring program will be completed soon along with the next step of the program, which is the third review. How this will be carried out will be discussed by the Ministry of Finance with the new authorities.
කොහොමද කරන්න කියන වැඩපිළිවෙල මම හිතන්නේ මුදල් අමාත්‍යාංශයේ අලුත් පත්වෙච්ච ආයතනය කතා කරලා තීරණය කරා ඒක මම හිතනවා.
දැන් දෙවන කාර්තුවේදී ආර්ථික වර්ධන වේගය දශම ගණනකින් ටිකක් අඩු වෙලා තියෙනවා. ඒකට හේතුව බදු ආදායම් අඩුවීමද නැත්නම් තවත් හේතු තියෙනවද සහ දැන් රුපියලට සාපේක්ෂව ඩොලරයගේ දැන් ටිකක් අඩු වෙලා තියෙනවා. රුපියල ශක්තිමත් වෙලා තියෙනවා. මේක කෘත්‍රිම තත්ත්වයක්ද නැත්නම් ඉදිරියටත් මේ තත්ත්වය පවතිවිද?
ආර්ථික වර්ධනය දෙවන කාර්තුවේ
Economic growth in the second quarter was 4.7%. As I think that has not shrunk. When compared with the cumulative period of 2023, it is a growth exceeding our expectations. The earlier our annual projection was 3%, later we revised it to 4%. Current data indicates that the annual growth will surpass that level. I do not see a correlation between tax income and the growth rate. According to data, tax income has not decreased, it has in fact increased. There is no major fluctuation in exchange rates. We are intervening to smooth out the process if necessary.
එහෙම විශාල වශයෙන් උච්චාවචන වීමක් නැහැ. අපි අවස්ථාවලදී මැදිහත් වෙලා යම් කිසි ආකාරයකට අර ස්මූතන් අවුට් කරන්න තමයි කරන්නේ.
There is expectation that growth is going to be revised will be better than what is expected. Do you all hope to make a revision on that?
Early expectation that 2024 would be around 3% in our projections, and IMF had I think 2%. They revised from 1.2 and other agencies also at around 2%. When you look at the early indicators and current economic activities, we now see strong evidence that economy will be growing well over 3%. I think we will not announce officially this is our projection for this year, and towards the end of the year probably when we see actual numbers we might revise. I'm sure budget Minister of Finance will revise their projections when they present budget.
In terms of rupee, Governor, we see some sort of appreciation this week. Is it because of the central bank buying dollars, or what's really happening?
In the last couple of days there has been excess liquidity, US dollar liquidity in the market, so we have been able to purchase also to a certain extent, and also we have been able to manage the currency and also appreciated a bit.
ඔබතුමා දිකටම ඔබතුමාගේ සහයෝගය ලබා දෙනවද මා බැංකුව අධිපතිවරයා විසින්?
ප්‍රදාය උනේ ඒ අවස්ථාවල ඒ අධිපතිවරුන් සහ මුදල් මණ්ඩල සමාජිකයන්ගේ හේතු මත ගත තීරණ වෙන්න පුළුවන්.
Historically, governors may have resigned due to decisions made by monetary boards. I am not commenting on that. However, according to the new CBSL Act, officials are appointed for a specific term and we have a responsibility to serve during that period. As an independent board, I believe that the resignation of officials should be a personal or board decision. There should not be a tradition of resigning solely due to a change in administration.
රජයක් වෙනස් වුණු පමණින් වෙනස් විය යුතු නැද්ද කියන එක ඒ මණ්ඩලයේ ඉන්න සමාජිකයන්ගේ පුද්ගලික තීරණ මිසක් ඒක තියෙන මේ සම්ප්‍රදායක් අනුව කළ විරුද්ධයක් නෙවෙයි කියලා තමයි මගේ මතය.
The International Monetary Fund, meanwhile, has recommended that the Central Bank of Sri Lanka target the midpoint of a policy corridor among other inflationary pressures and has urged the adoption of a single policy rate. This information was outlined in the IMF's recent technical assistance report. The global lender stated that the macroeconomic crisis compounded by the pandemic has created significant challenges for conducting monetary policy in Sri Lanka. It has recommended a transitory model for monetary operations centered on 1 week liquidity operations while still allowing for a certain level of market segmentation. Key recommendations outlined and included introducing a single policy rate to strengthen monetary policy, signaling modifying the statutory reserve ratio and operationalizing standing facilities to form an interest rate corridor. In later stages, when the central bank can effectively target aggregate liquidity management should revert to a mid-corridor system with open market operations calibrated based on liquidity forecasts according to IMF recommendations. Prime Minister Dr. Harini Amarasuriya, who is currently serving as the Interim Minister of Sports, emphasized the need for the ministry to focus on reducing and controlling costs for specific events. The minister and the Premier also highlight the importance of addressing other issues such as gender-based violence within sports and taking action to create more policies against it. During a discussion held today, Premier Amarasuriya stated that the politicians should not be invited to school events, citing that this could help limit the use of children for political purposes.
A meeting was held earlier this afternoon at the Ministry of Sports and Youth under the patronage of Prime Minister Dr. Harini Amarasuriya, who is also serving as the Interim Minister of Sports. During the meeting, the Prime Minister discussed current issues within the ministry and future plans with ministry officials.
විශේෂයෙන්ම මේ ඉදිරි කාලය තුල ප්‍රමුඛතා ලයිස්තුවක් සකස් කිරීම වෙනුවෙන් තමයි මේ
We held this meeting with a special focus on making a list of priorities for the future. During the discussions, some noteworthy matters came up, especially the Sports Act. It was discussed for a long time. We should continue that process. When it comes to the issues that we notice, we are trying our best to make sure that the costs are reduced and controlled under our government. So we inform the officials to intervene on the cost control when it comes to the events that are held by the ministry. I also requested that attention be paid to the costs that we incur. Our attention must also be given to gender equality, gender-based violence and sexual harassment in the industry of sports and youth activities. It has especially become an issue in the sports industry. At the moment, there is no proper action or policy in the sports ministry in this regard. So if we are planning to promote sports to women and girls, we must take action against gender-based violence, and I emphasized how we should take action to create policies in this regard. During our discussions, there were many issues based on this matter, and I made a suggestion that we should take action regarding this issue.
දෙන්න කියන එකත් මම යෝජනා කරා.
මේ දැනුවත් කරලා තිබුණා ඒ කියන්නේ පාසල් ළමුන්ගේ උත්සවවලට කිසිසේත්ම දේශපාලනඥයින් කැඳවන්න එපා කියලා. මොකද්ද එහෙම?
මම කිව්වේ පාසල් වල තියෙන උත්සව වලට
I said that politicians should not intervene in every school event, such as openings of school buildings unnecessarily. By inviting those politicians, unbearable costs will appear, and we must do our best to not use children for political projects.
US President Joe Biden has extended his congratulations to the newly elected Sri Lankan President Anura Kumara Dissanayake and on the peaceful and democratic election on the 21st of September. Taking to X yesterday, President Biden stated that the people of Sri Lanka chose President Anura Dissanayake as president in a free, fair and peaceful election on which Sri Lankans can be proud. While congratulating President Dissanayake, Biden highlighted that he is looking forward to working with Sri Lanka's newly elected president to advance peace, security and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific region. In response, President Anura Dissanayake conveyed that Sri Lanka will be working closely with the United States to strengthen both the countries' long-term friendly relations under his leadership. President Dissanayake also reiterated the government's commitment to a peaceful, secure and prosperous Indo-Pacific region. The Japanese ambassador to Sri Lanka, Muzukoshi Hideaki, affirmed that the Japanese government has expressed its complete commitment to support the newly elected president's anti-corruption program. During a meeting at the presidential secretariat yesterday, Ambassador Muzukoshi further stated that the 11 halted projects funded by the Japanese government will be resumed on time. The Kandy City Water Management Project Phase 2 of Bandaranaike International Airport Development Project, the Terrestrial Television Broadcast Digitalization Project, the National Transmission and Distribution Network Development Project, Phase 2 of the Anuradhapura North Water Supply Project, the Rural Infrastructure Development Project are part of these projects. The Japanese ambassador stated that the agreement also encloses the swift completion of the first phase of the Habarana Vayangura transmission line and the Anuradhapura North Water Supply Project. Senior Deputy Inspector General Priyantha Veerasurya has been appointed as Acting Inspector General of Police by President Anura Kumara Dissanayake. President Secretary Dr. Nandika Kumaranaike presented the appointment letter to the Acting IGP at the Presidential Secretariat in Colombo today. Prior to this appointment, Priyantha Veerasurya has served as the Senior DIG in charge of the North Central Province. The Supreme Court today initiated contempt of court proceedings against former State Intelligence Service Director Nilantha Jayawardena for failing to pay the full compensation owed to the victims of the Easter Sunday terror attacks in 2019. The case in question was taken up before a two-member judge bench consisting Justices Sobitha Rajakaruna and Dhammika Ganepala this morning. The writ petition was filed requesting that an order be issued to the IGP and other respondents directing them to take legal action against the former intelligence chief over his failure to prevent the coordinated attacks 5 years ago despite receiving sufficient intelligence information. The petitioners have also sought a writ order calling for the arrest of Jayawardena under criminal law and subsequent legal action be initiated against him. After considering the submissions of both parties, the Supreme Court decided to proceed with contempt of court charges and directed Nilantha Jayawardena to appear before court on the 7th of October. In politics, Samagi Janabalawegaya leader Sajith Premadasa has announced key appointments to several influential positions within his party and coalition. As part of these changes, former parliamentarian Imtiaz Bakir Marker has been appointed as the new chairman of the Samagi Janabalawegaya. Additionally, former parliamentarian Kabir Hashim has been appointed as the general secretary of the party. Meanwhile, former Gampaha district parliamentarian Harshana Rajakaruna has been appointed as chairman of the SJB's Gampaha district contingent. With that, here's a look at some local news from across Sri Lanka in brief.
Following heavy rainfall yesterday, the Buttala area was reported to be inundated. The Bellabaya, Monaragala, Buttala, Badalkumura and Katuragama roads were also flooded. Meanwhile, the Akurasa Simbalagoda main road was inundated from the Panadagama area due to the overflowing of the Nilwara river. Meanwhile, 225 packs of cigarettes, which were illegally imported to the island, were seized at the arrivals terminal at the Bandaranaike International Airport. The suspect, who was arrested with the stock of illegal cigarettes in her possession, was revealed to be a resident of Hunumulla. In other local news, the second stage of excavation at the mass grave, which was recently discovered at the Colombo port, commenced today. Archaeologist Professor Raj Somadeva is among officials in charge of excavations.
Star dishwasher Dally Hell Indul Pahasuwen Sede. Star dishwasher magic tub එක.
Crunchy goodness for hunger on the go.
Welcome back. We take you to the Colombo Stock Exchange, and the bourse edged down today with turnover crossing 2.9 billion rupees. The benchmark all share price index climbed 0.87%, settling 11,773.88. Trading on the index fell to 128 million rupees or shares from 238 million in the previous session. The S&P SL 20 climbed 0.76%, ending at 3,409.90. During the week, the SPI and the S&P SL gained 7.4% and 9.9% respectively. The capital goods sector was the top contributor to turnover, while the banking sector came in second. Foreign investors closed as net buyers, purchasing shares worth 195 million rupees, while domestic investors were net sellers, offloading shares worth 2.8 billion rupees. Let's take a look at the rupee exchange rate for the day. In corporate affairs, DFCC Bank concluded Sri Lanka's first ever green bond issuance, which was heavily oversubscribed on its opening day. In a statement today, the CSE noted that the issuance of the first green bond represents a pivotal step towards sustainable financing. With that, here's a look at corporate news in brief.
DFCC Bank concluded Sri Lanka's first ever green bond issuance, which was heavily oversubscribed on its opening day, the 12th of September 2024. The issue represents a substantial boost for the nation's solar energy sector, as the proceeds are earmarked exclusively for renewable energy projects that generate significant environmental benefits. The bonds are classified as Type A with a tenure of 3 years and a fixed interest rate of 12% per annum, with annual interest payouts and a bullet capital repayment at the end of the bond's tenure. Meanwhile, Hydromony Apparel announced that its net zero science-based targets have been officially approved by the Science Based Targets Initiative, making it the first organization in Sri Lanka to have secured this milestone. As part of the company's commitment, Hydromony has set ambitious near-term and net zero targets applicable to countries within its global footprint, which include Bangladesh, Sri Lanka and Vietnam. The near-term targets approved by the Science Based Targets Initiative include reducing absolute Scope 1 and 2 greenhouse gas emissions by 54.6% and reducing Scope 3 emissions from purchased goods and services by 32.5% by 2033 from a 2022 base year. Also in corporate news, Siapata Finance PLC posted a steady financial growth for the first half of 2024, ending on the 30th of June, with the company recording a profit after tax of 513 million rupees, indicating a 189% increase compared to the corresponding period last year. During the period, net interest income notably surged to 70%, reaching 2.078 million rupees compared to the previous year. Additionally, the finance company witnessed satisfactory financial stability against socio-economic shocks during the period in review.
And that wraps up tonight's edition of First at 9. I'm Indivaria Muatta. Good night.